Cleveland didn't erupt over a dropped pass. It exploded over what that moment symbolized. Because what happened on that field wasn't just another mistake you shrug off on a Sunday afternoon. It was the kind of play that makes an entire fan base stop and ask an uncomfortable question. Is this really who we're building around? This was supposed to be the start of something new, a clean break from years of chaos, missed chances, and false hope. The Browns finally had a quarterback people believed in, a rookie who looked calm under pressure, confident in the pocket, and ready to lead. But instead of that story taking off, one play flipped the entire conversation upside down, and now everything feels fragile again. What's making this situation so explosive isn't just what went wrong, it's who it happened to. This wasn't a no-name receiver fighting for a roster spot. This was the guy Cleveland invested in, the one they traded for, the one they paid to be reliable when things got tough. And when the moment arrived, when the ball hit his hands and the spotlight was brightest, the result sent shockwaves through the city. Almost immediately, fans started asking questions that go way beyond the stat sheet. Questions about effort, about hunger, about whether this player is truly locked in or just going through the motions. And once those doubts take hold, they don't fade quietly, they spread fast, especially in a football city that's already been burned too many times. Because here's the uncomfortable truth, young quarterbacks remember moments like this. Trust is built or broken in seconds, and when a perfectly thrown ball turns into a turnover not because of coverage or pressure, but because it was simply taken away, it forces everyone watching to reevaluate what they thought they knew. And once you see the play that triggered all of this, it becomes impossible to look at the Browns' future the same way again. This moment hits harder because of where the Browns are right now. Teams in transition don't get many chances to reset the narrative, and Cleveland finally believed they had one. A rookie quarterback stepping into the spotlight always changes the timeline. Every snap becomes a building block, every rep is about trust, and every mistake gets magnified, especially when it doesn't come from the rookie. When a young quarterback takes over, the entire offense has an unspoken responsibility. Veterans are supposed to stabilize things. They're the safety net when reads break down and the pressure starts closing in. That's why wide receivers matter so much in these moments. They're not just catching passes, they're sending a message that says, "Throw it my way, I've got you." That's exactly why this play landed like a gut punch. It didn't just stall a drive, it planted doubt. Because when a quarterback delivers a clean throw and watches it slip away, it changes how he plays the next snap, the next read, the next third down. Trust is fragile, and once it cracks, the ripple effect can derail an entire offense before it ever finds its footing. What makes this worse is that Jerry Judy wasn't brought in to be part of the learning curve. He was supposed to shorten it. The Browns didn't trade assets and hand out a serious contract for potential or patience. They paid for certainty, for experience, for someone who had already seen NFL pressure and knew how to respond when the moment demanded toughness. And that's why fans aren't treating this like a random miscue. They see it as a crossroads, a signal that something deeper might be wrong. Because in this league, rebuilding teams don't fail because rookies struggle. They fail when the veterans meant to carry the load quietly disappear when it matters most. And once that realization sets in, the focus shifts fast, from one play to one player to whether Cleveland misread the entire situation from the start. Long before Jerry Judy ever put on a Browns jersey, there were already questions trailing him, the kind that don't always show up in box scores but follow players from locker room to locker room. When word started spreading that Cleveland was making a move for him, the reaction out of Denver wasn't exactly grief. In fact, reports and fan chatter suggested the opposite. There was a sense that the Broncos were ready to turn the page, and that alone raised eyebrows across the league. National voices added fuel to that skepticism. Analysts and former players openly questioned whether Jeudy had ever fully lived up to the expectations that came with his draft position. The talent was obvious, but the consistency wasn't. Some said the flashes masked deeper issues. Others hinted that effort and competitiveness came and went depending on the situation. None of it was ever confirmed as fact, but when enough people say the same thing in different places, it stops sounding like noise. There was also the lingering debate about identity. Was Jerry Judy truly a #1 receiver, or was he a skilled piece who thrived best when the pressure wasn't squarely on him? At Alabama, he was surrounded by elite talent. In Denver, he never quite became the focal point offenses fear. Those questions followed him quietly, even as Cleveland chose to bet against the doubt. And to be fair, the Browns knew the risk. This wasn't a blind move. They gave up valuable draft capital and committed real money because they believed a change of scenery would unlock the player people once projected him to be. The idea was simple: new system, new quarterback, fresh start. Sometimes that's all it takes. But when you look back now, it's hard not to see the warning signs lining up. The whispers about commitment, the pushback from former teammates and analysts, the uneasy feeling that the resume didn't quite match the reputation. Cleveland rolled the dice anyway, hoping those concerns were exaggerated, hoping they'd be the team that got the best version of him. And for a brief stretch, it almost looked like they might be right, until the story took a very different turn. At first, there was no reason to panic. Early in the season, Jerry Judy looked like he was settling in. He wasn't dominating games, but he was doing enough to justify the optimism. Routes looked sharp, the ball stuck to his hands more often than not. There were flashes, the kind that reminds you why teams keep betting on upside. Then the quarterback change happened, and everything shifted. Once Shedeur Sanders took over as the starter, Judy's game didn't just cool off, it unraveled. The timing felt off. Routes that should have been automatic suddenly looked hesitant, almost improvised. Balls that hit his hands turned into incompletions. And the confidence that once showed up in his body language started fading snap by snap. This wasn't the normal adjustment period people expect when a rookie steps in. Growing pains are one thing. This felt different. The mistakes weren't about miscommunication or scheme. They were basic, fundamental breakdowns, the kind you don't expect from a veteran who's been paid to anchor the offense. Fans noticed it immediately. So did the cameras. Plays where Judy looked half a step late or disengaged started stacking up, and the more it happened, the harder it became to explain away as coincidence. A bad week turns into a bad stretch. A bad stretch turns into a pattern. That's when the questions changed. Instead of asking whether the rookie quarterback was ready, people started wondering why the receiver wasn't meeting him halfway. Because if the quarterback is making the right reads and delivering catchable passes, the spotlight shifts fast, and it doesn't land gently. And just as that frustration was boiling over, one single snap would turn a concerning trend into a full-blown controversy. It happened in a moment that should have been forgettable. No chaos, no broken protection, no desperation throw, just a clean drop back, a calm read, and a ball released exactly where it needed to be. Shedeur Sanders did everything right, stepped into the throw, trusted the route, and delivered a pass that every quarterback hopes his receiver turns into something positive. The ball hit Jerry Judy square in the hands. This wasn't a highlight reel attempt or a jump ball in traffic. It wasn't a risky throw into tight coverage. It was routine, the kind of completion that keeps drives alive and builds rhythm. For a split second, it looked exactly like that, until it didn't. Instead of securing the catch, Judy hesitated, and in that hesitation, the defender closed. What happened next stunned everyone watching. The ball wasn't knocked loose, it wasn't tipped, it was taken, ripped away in plain sight, like the defender wanted it more and knew it. The replay made it worse. Freeze the frame, and you can see both of Judy's hands on the football. Control was there, the opportunity was there, and then somehow it was gone. No fight, no struggle, just possession lost in a moment that demanded strength and resolve. Social media exploded within minutes. Fans replayed the clip again and again, trying to make sense of it. Some thought there had to be more to it, a missed call, a hidden angle, something that explained how a veteran receiver lets that happen. But the more people watched, the clearer it became. There was no excuse hiding in the footage. That one play didn't just kill a drive. It shifted the mood around the entire team, because when a perfectly thrown ball turns into a turnover due to pure failure to finish, it stops being about execution and starts being about mentality. And that's when Cleveland stopped asking what went wrong and started asking who they could actually trust. Cleveland media doesn't overreact lightly. This is a city that has endured decades of disappointment, blown leads, and failed rebuilds. Bad plays happen. Bad seasons happen, and usually players who show effort get patience. That's why what came next felt so different. The reaction from local radio and analysts was immediate and brutal. This wasn't framed as a tough break or a learning moment. It was called out for what it looked like, a veteran failing in a moment where veterans are supposed to set the tone. And the fact that it happened with a rookie quarterback under center only poured gasoline on the fire. On air, the conversation shifted away from schemes and play design and zeroed in on accountability. The argument was simple and devastating. If that play came from a late-round rookie or a depth receiver barely hanging onto a roster spot, you live with it, you coach it up and move on. But this wasn't that. This was a player the Browns paid to be dependable, to be strong at the catch point, to lead by example. Hosts pointed out that Cleveland didn't just acquire talent, they bought expectations, draft picks, cap space, a role carved out as a cornerstone of the passing game. And in that context, letting a defender take the ball away wasn't just a mistake, it was unacceptable. What made the criticism sting even more was how consistent it was across platforms. Different shows, different personalities, same conclusion. This wasn't about piling on, it was about recognizing a pattern that had become impossible to ignore. The doubts that followed Jeudy from Denver were no longer hypothetical, they were playing out in real time. And when respected local voices start saying out loud what fans are already thinking, the narrative hardens fast. At that point, the conversation isn't about fixing one play anymore, it's about whether the Browns misjudged the player entirely. And just when it felt like the backlash couldn't get any louder, an unexpected voice took over the conversation and sent it into overdrive. The moment that truly pushed this situation over the edge didn't come from a press conference or a studio desk. It came from a raw, unfiltered reaction online. A longtime Browns supporter and former player known as GPM hit record and said what a lot of people were thinking but hadn't heard spoken that bluntly yet. His clip spread fast, not because it was loud, but because it was direct. He shut down the idea that the quarterback deserved even a sliver of blame. According to him, there was nothing complicated about the play. The throw was clean, the read was correct, the ball was exactly where it needed to be. End of discussion. What made his reaction resonate wasn't just passion, it was credibility. He spoke from experience, from someone who had actually been on the field and understood what winning those moments requires. He broke down how defenders think, how they smell hesitation, and how quickly they pounce when a receiver shows weakness at the catch point. He even admitted something that made fans wince. As a defensive player, he would have loved lining up against someone who didn't fight for the ball. Those are the matchups defenders circle, the ones where you play aggressive because you know the receiver isn't going to outwork you. Hearing that out loud changed the tone of the conversation. Suddenly, this wasn't just a fan base venting, it was a former player confirming their worst fear, that what everyone saw wasn't bad luck, but a competitive failure. The clip became validation, proof that the outrage wasn't emotional or unfair, it was rooted in football reality. And once that perspective took hold, the narrative shifted completely. This stopped being about one incompletion, it became about identity, toughness, and whether Jerry Judy was someone defenses actually respected. And while that debate raged online, the Browns themselves quietly started signaling something important behind the scenes. While the noise outside the building kept getting louder, the Browns front office responded the only way teams ever really do, with action. No press release, no public shots fired, just quiet roster decisions that spoke volumes to anyone paying attention. Cleveland started reinforcing the receiver room, and that alone raised eyebrows, because teams confident in their top options don't scramble for depth. They don't go out of their way to secure insurance. They double down on what they already believe in. And right now, the Browns are doing the opposite. One of the clearest signals came from how they handled Jamari Thrash, a late-round pick with limited expectations. Thrash wasn't supposed to matter much this season, but suddenly he did. He earned snaps, he earned trust, and even with modest numbers, he showed something the coaching staff clearly valued: effort and reliability when his number was called. That contrast hasn't gone unnoticed. On one side, you have a highly paid veteran struggling to finish plays. On the other, a young receiver with everything to prove, fighting for every opportunity. In the NFL, coaches don't care about contracts when the ball was in the air. They care about who they can trust. The Browns' pursuit of additional offensive weapons sends a clear message without ever saying it out loud. They know this offense isn't complete. They know asking a rookie quarterback to succeed with inconsistent pass catchers is a losing formula, and they're already preparing for the possibility that the current hierarchy at wide receiver may not hold. This isn't punishment, it's pragmatism. Teams that want to win don't wait for problems to fix themselves. They create competition, they raise the floor, and sometimes they quietly move on from the idea that a player will eventually become what they hoped. Which is exactly why the next conversation became so dangerous, because instead of talking about receivers, people started talking about replacing the quarterback. As frustration mounted, a familiar and reckless idea started creeping into the conversation: the draft. Specifically, whether Cleveland should already be thinking about taking another quarterback. It's the kind of panic-driven take that surfaces when things feel unstable, and it ignores what's actually happening on the field. Because when you strip away the noise, Shedeur Sanders hasn't been the problem. He's shown poise in moments where young quarterbacks usually unravel. He's gone through progressions. He's stood in the pocket and delivered throws under pressure. He's made decisions that tell you the game isn't moving too fast for him. Yet somehow, the blame keeps circling back to him. And that's where franchises make mistakes that haunt them for years. Drafting another quarterback wouldn't fix this offense. It would reset the clock and repeat the same cycle Cleveland has lived through far too many times. New QB, same problems, same confusion. History is brutal on teams that fail young quarterbacks by surrounding them with instability. Talent gets labeled as unproven when the reality is they were unsupported. Great throws turn into incompletions, confidence erodes, and eventually the quarterback takes the fall for mistakes that weren't his. The smarter path is also the harder one. Build around what you have. Protect him better. Give him receivers who finish plays, fight through contact, and make his life easier instead of harder. Quarterbacks don't develop in a vacuum. They develop when the people around them do their jobs. This is why the draft conversation matters so much. Not because Cleveland might make a bold move, but because one bad decision here could derail everything they finally started to build. And in the middle of that debate, Jerry Judy's role in all of this becomes impossible to avoid. As the frustration grew, the conversation quietly drifted into uncomfortable territory. Not accusations, not declarations, just speculation. The kind that surfaces when performance drops so sharply that coincidence no longer feels like a satisfying explanation. Some fans have wondered if this is simply a chemistry issue. Timing between a quarterback and receiver isn't automatic, especially with a rookie under center. Routes can be a half step off. Anticipation can take time. That explanation sounds reasonable on the surface, and in many cases, it's enough. But others aren't convinced that's the full story. There's been online buzz suggesting Jeudy may be struggling with frustration. Losing wears on players differently, and not everyone handles it the same way. When expectations collide with reality, some press harder, others drift. It's been said that body language can tell a story long before words do, and more than a few people have pointed to moments on film where the energy just doesn't look the same. There's also quiet talk about whether personal factors could be affecting his focus. Nothing confirmed, nothing reported as fact, just the acknowledgement that players are human and unseen challenges can show up in performance. Still, speculation only goes so far in a league that judges results above all else, because no matter the reason, the outcome is the same: missed opportunities, broken trust, a growing sense that something isn't clicking when it needs to most. In the NFL, explanations don't earn extra time, production does. And when a single play becomes the symbol of all these unanswered questions, it stops being analyzed and starts being remembered. Which is why the next few weeks may decide far more than people realize. The clock is moving faster than it feels. In the NFL, 3 weeks can erase months of criticism or lock it in permanently. And for Jerry Judy, this closing stretch isn't just about improving numbers, it's about survival. Narratives harden quickly in this league, and once a player gets labeled, shaking it can take years, if it happens at all. There is still a path back. It's simple, but not easy. Finish catches, fight through contact, make the contested plays that separate veterans from role players. Show urgency when the ball was in the air, and energy when it's not. One strong performance won't fix everything, but consistent effort will start to shift the conversation. Because right now, that one play is doing all the talking. It's looping in people's minds every time his name comes up. Every drop reinforces it. Every quiet snap feeds it. And if nothing changes, it becomes the moment people point to when they explain how things fell apart. For the Browns, patience is wearing thin. This team isn't rebuilding blindly anymore. They believe they have their quarterback. They believe the window is opening, not closing. And players who don't align with that urgency get replaced, quietly, inefficiently. This stretch is Judy's opportunity to remind everyone why Cleveland took the gamble in the first place, why they traded for him, why they believed he could be more than a complementary piece. But if the effort doesn't match the expectation, the outcome becomes predictable. Because in this league, careers don't usually end with a single mistake. They end when players fail to respond after it. When you strip away the noise, this situation isn't really about one dropped ball or one struggling receiver. It's about standards, about what a team is willing to accept when it believes it's finally moving in the right direction. Moments like this expose the difference between talent and trust, between reputation and reliability. The Browns now know something they didn't before. They know their quarterback can do his job under pressure. They know he can make the throw when it matters. And just as importantly, they know exactly where the cracks are around him. That clarity, as painful as it is, can shape the future faster than blind optimism ever could. For Jerry Judy, this has become a defining chapter, not because redemption is impossible, but because effort is no longer optional. Every snap from here on out is being evaluated through a different lens, not for flashes, not for potential, but for fight. For Cleveland, the message is even bigger. You don't build a winning team on names or contracts. You build it on players who want the ball when it's hardest to get, players who compete when things aren't perfect, players who understand that trust, once lost, is the hardest thing to earn back. And that's the real takeaway. This wasn't just a controversy, it was a revelation, one that forces everyone involved to decide who they are, what they value, and how serious they are about winning. Because the future is already here, and it's demanding answers.